In our last video, we went full IE Stage 2 on our Mark 7 Golf R, along with a few of their new products, including all-wheel drive MQB lowering springs and their new polymer intake lid, both of which are available at the link below. In today's video, we're gonna get this car on the dyno, see how much power it makes, and get the alignment dialed over at our friends Pickups Plus Cars. But before we do that, we've got to get our ride height dialed in. And before you say, hey Jake, how are you dialing in ride height? You just installed lowering springs. Stay tuned, I'm gonna explain.
Let me tell you something! Let me tell you something!
Let's take a minute to talk about rake, but not this rake. Rake is a description of the angle of your car in relationship to the ground. Now, many different cars have complex body lines and weird things going on, so this is typically easiest to do by looking at the bottom of the car or the pinch weld and taking a measurement of the front and back of your car to see what the angle of rake is in relationship to the ground. A positive rake is going to be lower in the front and higher in the back, and a negative rake is going to be lower in the rear and higher in the front. A big problem with MQB cars is once you lower and level them, they appear to have negative rake. Let me show you what I'm talking about.
Let me tell you something!
I've got a few drawings on the board here to try to explain this perceived reverse rake issue. Hey, Zane, you paying attention? I know your car's on the screen. You gotta pay attention, this is important stuff. Eyes up front or you're not getting that box of donuts we talked about. Okay, I've done my best to exaggerate these angles a little bit so that way you can get the point on camera. This obviously isn't to scale. We don't need to go into, details critiquing my artwork here. What is this? Who threw this? And why is it so tiny? I don't even know I'm asking Zane. I know it was you. And you know what? Let's just have a little talk about this right in front of all your little friends. Mr. Class Clown, Mr. Too Cool for School. We got important things we're trying to do, and you're just constantly interrupting me. Do you have anything that you need to share with the class that's so important that you had to throw this little paper wad at me? No, I didn't think so. And you know what? I'm playing golf with your dad this weekend. We're gonna have a chat about this. He's not only gonna be upset, he's gonna be disappointed in you. So yeah, go to the principal's office. No. Just straight to the principal's office, and we're gonna talk about a possible suspension as soon as class is over. Does anybody else have anything funny they wanna add?
Oh, wait a minute!
I didn't think so. Let's get back to the lesson. Here's our car right here. We've got our pinch weld or our kind of body line. We've got our front wheel and wheel well, rear, same thing 3 times. Up top, we've got a stock car. And what the factory does on many Volkswagens, Audis, Porsches, BMWs specifically, they're like the worst offenders of this. They have some positive rake built into the car. To the front of our pinch weld, we'll do that, is a shorter distance than from the ground to the rear of our pinch weld. So we've got a downhill going towards the front, but our wheel wells have the approximate same height. So what you have there is you have this gap from your tire to your wheel well is about the same front and rear, but this gap is smaller at the pinch weld in the front than it is in the rear. So what happens is, in the case of our IE springs or pretty much any lowering springs that try to level out the car, they are leveling the pinch weld, not the wheel well. So what happens is you drop an inch in the front with the new MQB all-wheel drive springs, and we're gonna write that up here. MQB all-wheel drive, available at performancebyie.com/P3. Get that discount. Drops an inch in the front, an inch and a half in the rear. So what we're doing here is we're leveling out the pinch weld. Again, we had the big gap in the rear, small gap in the front. Now we're level, but the problem is we now have a decent gap between our tire and wheel well here, but this gap is now much smaller. And so even though the car is technically level, it looks like you got a squat going on. You got like a Whistling Diesel Carolina squat going on. And that's frustrating because the car looks great, it is level, but if it's your personal preference to have that wheel gap be the same in the front and the rear, you're not thrilled about that. So again, this is not an IE problem. This is a MQB across the board. The car's built kind of in a weird way problem. So what's the solution? Call up Christian. I'm talking to him about this. I'm learning a lot about these cars. I'm like Mr. Mark 6 guy, let's buy a totaled car and fix it up. I don't have like new nice stuff. What we did is we've got this guy. This is a Mark II TT rear spring perch. Factory part, got the package right here. There's your part number. I will also put that below, but this is right from Audi. It was like less than 30 bucks to get both of these together. And this factory perch is quite a bit thicker than a factory MQB perch. And so what that does is we're going to now slightly raise the rear of the car up so that we have almost an even amount of rake front to rear. That distance will be slightly higher in the rear, but our main goal in doing this is to maintain a proper, even wheel gap in between the front and rear. And I just said proper, but really this is personal preference. It's my preference to maintain an even wheel gap. That's just how I like my cars to look. So these pucks, we just simply have to drop our control arms down, toss that up on top of the spring in place of the factory puck, and it should level us right out to where we want to be. I'm gonna get these tossed in the car, and then we're gonna check that ride height, see what it looks like, get the car aligned, get her on the dyno, and let's see how much power we're making full IE stage 2. So here we are just getting everything started. I don't think I got footage of it, but you definitely want to start by disconnecting your height sensor on the driver's rear control arm. Next up, you're just going to put those spring perches right on top of the springs, push them back into place. I was just using a pry bar to pull the control arms down, and then you can see you can just easily push the spring right into place. Then I took a floor jack with a 2x4, lifted the control arm up into place to bolt it to the shock and the knuckle. And I always talk about the sway bar. Look at these control arms. Both of them go up together even though I'm only jacking up the passenger rear. That's your sway bar picking up the driver's rear. People fight them all the time. You should always disconnect both sides if you're trying to do something with your sway bar. Otherwise, it's just going to be under a ton of tension. You can see them both droop down there together. Here I'm doing the driver's rear. Just the same process, jacking up the control arm to get it lined up for the shock and the knuckle. And another important thing here too is to not tighten the bolts fully until you have it all the way jacked up. And right here I'm actually realizing that the two bolts for the knuckle and the shock are a little bit different in length. And so then I'm realizing I did the passenger rear wrong, but the shock bolt is going to be longer than the knuckle bolt because the lower control arm is wider there. So I'm going to have to take the other side back apart. And when the hand hammer doesn't work, grab yourself a real hammer. Pop that thing through. Get it seated in there. And right here, I'm just jacking up the car to ride height before I tighten these bolts. And that is going to make the bushings for the shock and the knuckle be in a relaxed position at ride height. And it's going to make sure they last a much longer time. Now they're clamped and I can let it down. And then over here, we're going to look at, that's the bolt I forgot. You can see it's just a little bit too short to use the locking ring. So when you have to do a job over a second time, big or small, what are your reactions? Do you get depressed? Do you get like mad, but you like try to contain it? Maybe you get a little more mad, threaten the car with violence? Still keeping it under control though. Right here, watch the pinch weld on the right side of the screen. I'm taking all the weight of the car up. The suspension's fully compressing. You just saw the pinch weld go up there. Now I'm good to tighten my bolts. We want to make sure we're at ride height. I did that by jacking the car up, the control arm up with a 2x4 there to get that weight up into the suspension. Now I'm letting it back down after the bolts are nice and tight. And we know those bushings are tightened in the ride height position. And then you, of course, want to remember to reconnect your height sensor. Don't forget that or your headlights are going to be mad at you. Then we're just getting the wheel folded on. You know, nothing fancy here. Just ugga-dugga, ugga-dugga, ugga-dugga. And then we get that satisfying lowering her back down. And even though she's not sagged down all the way, we can already see that she's sitting a little higher than before, which is exactly what we wanted to see. Well, there she is, sitting on the ground. Still hasn't had a chance to roll forward and kind of like let the suspension relax yet, but we do have a little bit bigger wheel gap back here than up front, and that's good because it's gonna sag down as we roll out. I'm gonna stop, go grab some lunch, hang out in the teacher's lounge, ponder how to deal with an annoying student. And then after that, we're gonna get this out on the road, get some shots, show you what it looks like, and then we're gonna get it on the dyno, get our alignment dialed in over at Pickles Plus Cars. So let's get some food and get this out on the road. Guys, I could not be happier with this car. I mean, the suspension, the stance is dialed. I feel like that's how it should have been from the factory. After getting those springs on with the TT purchase, it is just perfect wheel gap front to rear. And this car is just a freaking rocket. And I'm still getting over 33 miles to the gallon. It's just, couldn't ask for more. So I've got the dyno sheet here. I'm gonna let you know what we made, but first let's go over our hardware real quick. We've got the stage 2 IE ECU tune and the DSG tune, but under the hood we've got our 3-inch IE downpipe. We've got their turbo inlet kit, cold air intake with the brand new polymer lid and those MQB all-wheel drive springs. Just, this car has come together so well, and it's all one company. They offer so much stuff. Down to business time. We made 376.5 wheel horsepower with 372 foot-pounds of torque. Pretty hot day, but I mean, dude, I can't complain. That lines right up with IE was saying they made on their car. I think they said they made 433 crank, and then they made, I think, 380 wheel horsepower on their car. But the car's just so good. It's just a little Golf, but with all the creature comforts, all the assists. I'm normally not big on that stuff. I came from the Civic Type R. I loved how bare bones that car was. No assists, no anything. But this, it's got the adaptive cruise, it's got lane assist, it's got auto wipers, auto high beams, steering, headlights. It's got a little bit of everything in a little Golf, and I'm gonna say, I just feel kind of spoiled. I love all the companies we've worked with, and I really wanna thank IE for working with us on this car. And we've still got more to do. We can bolt on flex fuel to this. We can do a bigger turbo, and that's without touching the engine. I mean, that is just, it's crazy. So thanks again to IE. I'm really appreciative of all that we've been able to do together. And don't forget, you can get any of the parts we've put on this car and lots more. And you can get a big discount on it by using performancebyie.com/P3. Gonna get you a big fat discount when you go to their store. Buy some parts from them. They're great people, they got great products, and we love working with them. As always, we really appreciate you guys watching these videos. Drop a comment below, let us know what you think. You can find links to all these parts in the description below. That's gonna wrap it up for this one, and we'll see you in the next one.
Can you hear me?